Hello, I'm Dr. G. I'd like to welcome you to your course in microbiology. We'll begin by looking at a chapter of the main themes in microbiology to give you a brief introduction to the scope of this course. To start with, microbiology is the study of living things, and that those are things that are much too small to be seen without magnification. Micron means small, and biologia means the study of living things. Microorganisms, or microbes, are the microscopic organisms that we're talking about. Commonly, we might refer to them as germs, viruses, or other infectious agents. But not all of these germs cause disease, and many more are useful or even essential for human life to exist. Here's a quick scale to help us understand how small we're really talking here. Let's begin by thinking about a poliovirus. That's about 27 nanometers. And let's say if it was the size of a quarter, then we'd look at a common bacteria, Staphylococcus aureus, at 0.8 microns would be a beach ball. E. coli, they're rod-shaped, so they're 0.7 by 2.5 micrometers, would be the size of an adult human. And then we move up, the size of an elephant, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, at 5 microns. Paramecium caudatum, you may have seen in general biology running around under your microscope. Those are the size of a large yard. And then amoebas could be as large as the area of 10 city blocks. So as you can see, the range in size of organisms that we'll be studying this semester is vast. All the way from the size of a quarter to 10 city blocks. That's a pretty big range. Now, we have several major groups of microorganisms: the bacteria, algae, protozoa, helminths, which are parasitic invertebrate animals such as worms. We'll also study fungi. All of these are cellular microbes. However, we will be examining some acellular microbes, viruses. They're non-cellular and parasitic. Really, they're just a protein coat surrounding DNA or RNA, the genetic elements, and they can infect all living things, including other microorganisms. However, they cannot live alone. So, whether we consider them living or not, which is an argument, they are totally dependent on their host machinery in order to carry out their life cycle. There are a number of different branches of microbiology. We've got medical microbiology, we've got public health microbiology and epidemiology, the study of disease, immunology, industrial microbiology, agricultural microbiology, and environmental microbiology. So there are many different possibilities for further study in the field of microbiology. Now, because there are so many different branches of microbiology, microbiologists are sometimes referred to by the type of microbial system that they study. They could be bacteriologists. Those are people that study prokaryotes as opposed to the eukaryotes, so the smaller single-celled organisms. Mycology is the study of fungi. A phycologist studies algae. A protozoologist studies protozoans. Protozoans are eukaryotic single-cellular organisms. There's virologists that study viruses, and immunology, people that study the immune system, are called immunologists. Let's have a quick concept check. Which of these are acellular microbes? A, bacteria, B, viruses, C, protozoa, or D, yeasts? Well, we know that bacteria have cells, so we can cross them off the list. We know that protozoans have cells, so we can cross them off the list. And we know that yeasts, maybe they have cells, maybe they don't, but definitely viruses are acellular. Yeasts, in fact, do have cells, so they're off the list too. Now, if there's one thing that you take home from all the information that you'll learn this semester, it's how profound of an impact that microorganisms have on all aspects of the earth and its residents. Bacteria-like organisms first formed back about 3.5 billion years ago. These were all organisms without a true nucleus, so we call them prokaryotes, with karya meaning nucleus and pro meaning before, so pro before the nucleus. And it wasn't until about 2 billion years later, here, that we saw eukaryotes arrive. Eukaryotes are organisms that do have a nucleus and other cell organelles and membrane-bound organelles. So then you look all the way over to where humans showed up. It's just a speck in the scheme of things. So microorganisms have been around for billions of years. And getting all the way over to the right, where we are as humans, involved billions and billions of tiny little changes in DNA over that course of time. This is what we call evolution, the accumulation of heritable changes as organisms adapt to their environment. So accidental changes happen in the DNA that make an organism more fit for the place that it exists. Now, here's one point to consider, is that these prokaryotes, having been around for so long, are much better adapted to their environments than we are to ours. After all, they've had 3.5 billion years to get good at it. So the study of microbiology is highly relevant to our everyday life. Here are some of the ways. Firstly, microbes are the earliest organisms found in the fossil record. So as I've illuminated, they are highly adapted to their particular environments. They perform essential reactions in the environment. There are several species of bacteria that are involved in fixing nitrogen. So if we didn't have these microbes, then we wouldn't be able to get nitrogen out of the atmosphere and into the plant. So they could build molecules that cows eat to generate proteins that feed us. Also, we've been able to harness microbes to do work for us. For example, we've now had DNA technologies that have allowed us to use microbes to produce the insulin that type 1 diabetics need to survive. Now, sometimes, as we'll see through the semester, microbes can cause infectious diseases, but they have many more beneficial roles than infectious diseases that they cause. So microorganisms are found nearly everywhere. That is, they're ubiquitous. We find them deep in the Earth's crust, we find them in polar ice caps, and we find them in the deepest oceans and hydrothermal vents. They make up for their small size because they occur in such large numbers. And they have the ability to survive where many other organisms cannot. Microbes are heavily involved in the flow of energy, food, and nutrients through the Earth's ecosystem. So the study of environmental microbiology is really important. Microbial photosynthesis accounts for most of the atmospheric oxygen on Earth, not the plants, because there are so many more microbes than there are photosynthetic plants. Microbes are also essential for the decomposition of dead organisms. In fact, if it wasn't for so many bacteria and fungi, cycling of elements would cease, and we'd simply drown in our own waste. So microorganisms drive the structure of the whole Earth, including its soil components, the water and its dissolved solutes, and as well as the atmosphere. Elements such as sulfur, nitrogen, and phosphorus are cycled by microbes. You'll see throughout this semester how important the microbes are, not only for our survival, but for the health of the Earth in general. Humans have been using microorganisms for thousands of years, whether we knew it or not, in order to solve some of our human problems. By accident or choice, we've been using them to improve our life, and these improvements have had a huge influence on our civilizations. For example, baker's and brewer's yeast are species of fungi that are used for us to create alcohols and breads. Our cheeses, like Roquefort or Camembert, get their characteristics through growth of colonies of fungi. Thousands of years ago in Egypt, they kept moldy bread around to put in these open wounds, presumably to prevent infections. In the fields of industrial microbiology and food microbiology, microbes can be used to make or preserve food products, for example, yogurt or salami, and the example of cheeses. They can also produce important compounds like antibiotics, and hence the use of bread, MSG, or ethanol that we see used in the production of our beers and wines. We'll also manipulate microorganisms to produce products in an industrial setting. This is called biotechnology. Biotechnology is when we manipulate the microbes to produce products for us. We can use them for mining precious metals, for example. In the previous slide, you saw this picture of precious metal mining, where there's fields and fields of different microbes in states of extracting these precious metals. When we create new products by genetically modifying organisms, that is, manipulating the genetics of those microbes, it's called genetic engineering. Genetic engineering not only occurs in microorganisms, but also in plants and animals, and we create GMOs, or genetically modified organisms. An example of a GMO are BT tomatoes and BT potatoes. Both of those have a bacterial gene for pesticide that's inserted into their own genome, so no pesticides are necessary on the crops. Now, it's questionable whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. Are we ingesting pesticide because it's actually a gene inside the potato or the tomato? We don't really know many of the long-term effects of these genetically modified organisms. One of the techniques in genetic engineering is recombinant DNA technology. This allows us in the microbial field to take genes and engineer a particular microbe to synthesize desirable proteins. For example, this is the way insulin is made. We take a particular bacterial cell and then we insert the human insulin gene into its genome. And so then that cell makes unlimited amounts of insulin for us. Now, I don't know that that's a bad thing, but you make the decision. We also use microorganisms in bioremediation. That is, we introduce microbes into the environment to restore its stability and clean up toxic pollutants. We saw examples of this in oil spills, sometimes in chemical spills, and certainly it's becoming more and more prevalent in water and sewage treatment. You may see out in the woods sometimes some of these totally sustainable toilets that are taken care of by their bacterial inhabitants. So not only do microorganisms have their own role in maintaining our global environment, but we've also learned how to essentially farm them and use them for our benefits.